Everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you guys are keeping up with the rundown videos. A lot of new videos coming up this week. So make sure you guys are checking out these rundown videos because it'll get you caught up on the new information that's coming. So Biblical Bible series is coming up, as well as I said, the next DVD will be on the whole Gnostic faith. So we're going to be getting into that as well. Big video. So make sure you guys are checking out a lot of these rundown videos because it's a lot of prerequisite information you guys are going to need. So same thing in this video as well. So Pyramids was the video I did last night. Make sure you guys check that video out. If you don't have the full video, make sure you download it and watch it. A lot of information in these videos, going to be very relevant in videos to come. So I don't want you guys to be too lost. Make sure you guys are checking these videos out. Also, consultations. People have been asking me about consultations for a while. I know a lot of you guys know I do consultations. I've been doing them for years, but I haven't really made them available to Merkabah Academy members or Merkabah Scholar Society. So I'm going to make that available now. Usually scheduling I was doing for a group I used to speak to and for schooling events, and I was a part of this whole group thing. It's personal stuff, so I didn't really put that information out there because I didn't want any boo-boos messing up that situation. But now I'm going to make it available to Never Pagan members as well, anybody. So the link is in the description. If you want to discuss or schedule a one-on-one meeting with me, we can do it over Google Meet, which is a video chat, or just audio. So it'll still be probably Google Meet, but it'll be audio or video. It's up to you to choose whether to show yourself or not. But you can go ahead and schedule a meeting. I already have a bunch of bookings so far, so make sure you guys schedule quickly if you want a certain time slot. So the link is in the description for you guys to go ahead and schedule those bookings, and make sure you do them quick, that those spots are filling up. So yeah, we got a lot to get into. A lot of videos coming up. We're going to get right into this rundown video because we got a lot to show this weekend and the week to come. So lives will be coming up. I won't be doing too many more lives, as I said. They'll be reserved specifically for Merkabah Scholar Society members. But we have a lot of lives coming up for the membership, as well as the app. So talk about the app before. App is in the testing phase right now. It's going to be available any day now. I'm just waiting for a couple of things to come back. But the app is looking real good, and you guys will have links for that soon, as well as links for the next live meeting on YouTube. So stay tuned for that, for your emails. Working hard, super busy. I'm running all over the world. A lot of stuff going on. So yeah, we're going to get into this video. Thanks for watching. A lot of people don't understand how deep it is with astrology and the ancients, and that everything that they did was based on astrology. And really up until the medieval times, everything that the people did, even in England and Europe, was based on astrology. And as I will show you in the upcoming videos, how basically everything is dealing with astrology and based off of that when you really begin to understand. So this video is no different, but people need to understand the aspects of Osiris, as well as these other deities that we know are equated with Osiris, and why it all come together and makes sense. So most Christians believe when we talk about Osiris that we basically worship Osiris. When we talk about these Egyptian gods, we basically worship them. We chose to choose Egyptian gods over Jesus Christ and the prophets in the Bible, and that all this stuff is basically, just us accepting Egyptian stuff over biblical stuff, when we clearly have proof of the Egyptian stuff and no proof of the biblical stuff. Now, if you watch the videos, of course, you understand now that when we're talking about Osiris, when we're talking about these gods, that they represent different aspects of reality that exists. So with Osiris, he represents many things, as we'll get into in this video. Not just the backbone, not just agriculture, but many spiritual things, as well as the other Egyptian gods. But of course, when we go into Christianity, Jesus is supposed to be a real man that existed. Moses is supposed to be a real man that existed. And a lot of people don't understand the esoteric background behind these characters and what they really represent. Only with the ancient Egyptians and other, ancient cultures, we see that they created these beings, but they did not hide the aspects of which they belong to. They made them to help teach about these aspects and to get people to understand what these things represent. And to better get people to understand is to create stories around them. So If you're not into that understanding, you need to understand that first, before we get into everything. This is going to be a very good, very deep video, and you're going to learn a lot. It's going to connect a lot of dots for you guys. So now, we heard the story of Osiris. And I don't understand how a lot of conscious people, after leaving Christianity, could hear the story of Osiris and think that it's an actual story. Now, you have not just, religious people, but conscious people that actually believe in Osiris and these Egyptian gods as being beings that actually exist. A lot of people hear the story and think that Osiris was real and this is just a story, even though it sounds, absurd. This is just a story that, it's a myth just like the Bible, or it's a myth like the other ancient stories that we hear. But for conscious people, leaving the Bible to hear this story and think that it's an actual story is crazy. So we know it's metaphorical. You have, depending on which version of the story that you have heard or read, you have Osiris. We know Set chops him up into 13 pieces. 12 pieces are found. One is not, and that's his penis or the phalanx. And we know that Isis and Nephthys goes out and finds these pieces. And Isis hovers over him as a hawk and makes his penis grow and impregnates herself and gives birth to Horus. And you also have the story where, they go out and find him and he becomes the god of the underworld. Basically, in both stories, you have to understand the whole aspect of god of the underworld and what does that mean. So when we look at Osiris and we look at Osiris in the underworld, this is what we usually see. And this is from the Book of the Dead with Ani. And we see Osiris in the underworld, and we have so many references to Osiris in the underworld. But this depiction here is basically this. And we see this, and we see the zodiac. So while we have the representation of Jesus, and we understand Jesus means he represents a few things, Jesus himself alone represents the sun. He represents you as well. So does Osiris represent us and the sun as well. But Osiris alone represents the sun. He also represents all 12 signs of the zodiac. The disciples for Jesus represents the 12 signs of the zodiac. And how Osiris represents the entire zodiac is because he was chopped up in 14 pieces. 13 pieces were found. Those 13 pieces represent the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Osiris being the sun as well, the sun as well. The piece that was missing, of course, represents the phalanx. And of course, the phalanx represents the sun, the obelisk. So when you go back and you look at the obelisk and all the depictions of it and what it represents, it's a representation of the sun. So we know Osiris also represents the Jed. And the death of Osiris is called the fall of Osiris. It represents his fall. Do you think it's a coincidence that when you die, we say, you fall when you die? When a soldier dies, we say we have a fallen soldier. And we also have a season called fall. And what happens during the fall? The leaves basically die, they fall off the tree. So again, we have to understand it's not a play on words and that these words, it means something for a reason. So Osiris representing agriculture and representing growing the crops and nature and everything like that. This representation of his fall is giving you exactly that understanding of the fall. So this relief right here is called the fall of Osiris or the rising of Osiris. But all it is this. It's the fall equinox or the autumn or autumn equinox. Ra represents the rising sun, Atum the setting sun. Combined, you get Re Atum, who passes through the underworld every night. So when we see the cross of the zodiac, the vertical line represents the rise or fall. The horizontal line represents life and death. Rise is life, fall is death. So underneath this line represents the underworld, which is showing you that Osiris is the god of the underworld. When you see the depiction of Osiris being laid out, it's representing that. Just this horizontal line across the zodiac. And he represents the underworld because, again, we're talking about the fall equinox. We're talking about stuff that's happening underneath this equator. So we know that line really is the equator. Things that's happening during this time is what Osiris is representing. And it's simply that. So they show you, and it's all geometry, it's all math, it's science. They're showing you these vertical lines, and they're showing you these degrees basically on a circle, which is, masonry when you get into it, but basically to represent the zodiac itself, which, as I said, is really the key to everything when you understand the zodiac. So this depiction again is representing the rise or fall of Osiris, depending on where you want to place it at. And below that line is the underworld. So Osiris is the god of life, death, resurrection, vegetation, agriculture, etc. Represents us, he represents the sun, and many other things. So the raising and lowering of the jet is basically talking about the Corex festival, which I talked about before. When you understand during the Corex festival, you have that little man, which is Osiris, is in the shape of Osiris, and you see the wheat and barley growing from him. So when you look at the depiction, you can see that he's laying horizontally. So when you're in your coffin, when you're dead and gone, you lay horizontally. You lay flat on your back, or that's basically the death position. And we see it with our arms crossed and us laying flat on our back. So that Osiris laying horizontally symbolizes life during the Corex festival. The wheat and barley that's growing up is symbolizing resurrection or life from the underworld. It symbolizes rebirth or growth. So Isis, when she's growing the penis of Osiris, you basically have Osiris giving birth to himself, when you understand. So what does that sound like? When you look at the depiction, you see he's basically impregnating Isis to give birth to himself. It's the same thing as Jesus. Osiris is a god. He gives birth to himself, who he is the same as Horus, which is why Horus kills Set, because it's basically Osiris giving birth to himself through Isis. So he is also the father, and he's also the son, when you understand. So it's the same representation with Jesus. You have God impregnating Mary and giving birth to himself. And this is one of the reasons why the story is all confused, and some people don't want to say, well, Jesus is not God, and so on and so forth, so they can throw shade on the fact that it equals with the Egyptian story of Osiris. Because Osiris is basically giving birth to himself, just like with Jesus. So basically, this right here is the same as this. Take a look at it. I know it's going to blow people's mind, but it's the same exact thing. You have Jesus representing the sun. You have the 12 disciples. The same thing with Osiris, who he himself represents the sun, and also the 12 signs of the zodiac, just like the disciples represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. So you got to start putting this stuff together and understand we're talking about the same stuff. And as we go on, you're going to see what other deities is getting into the same exact thing that's going back to one understanding. We're talking about stars. We're talking about the universe. So you have autumn, which is basically fall, starting September 22nd and ends December 21st, which is the start of the winter solstice, as we all know. And then we know the whole story with Jesus Christ and the whole thing with that, and what that entails is the same stuff. So you have the rising and lowering of the Jed, which deals with the solstice and equinox. So now the solstice is when the sun is basically the furthest away from the equator during Earth's rotation. And you have the equinox, which is basically when it's at its closest distance from the equator. So Isis rising and lowering the Jed, and Mary holding Jesus is all symbolic. It's talking about the precession of the equinox and the solstice. So when you look at the depictions, they are the same, talking about the same thing, both representing the sun. So now we know Osiris represents many things. So when you look at this depiction of the Last Supper, these 12 disciples don't only represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. They don't also just represent, the seasons. They also represent planets and constellations. And when you look at this and you compare it to the Ani's Book of the Dead with Osiris, as I said, it's the same. But this becomes this. So as I said, you are the sun. Jesus and Osiris represents the sun. So when we're talking about the underworld, when it's talking about judgment, it's simply talking about the sun's journey through the constellations. which is our journey through the constellations. That's all it's talking about. When it's talking about Osiris being the god of the underworld, the sun is taking that journey to the underworld, plain and simple. So we're talking about, as I said, that horizontal line, which is basically, you have to look at it as a zodiac, a circle, and understand that below that line during this time frame, which would be the winter solstice, is the sun, going through that period. But the sun also making its entire journey through all the constellations is what it's representing when it's talking about Osiris. So in the book of Revelations, Jesus says, I'm the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and end. And we know that Osiris is also referred to as the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and end. That's what these represent. So just like God is Jesus, Osiris is Horus. So you have God basically giving birth to Jesus, or having Mary give birth to Jesus with no penis. The same symbolic thing with Osiris and Isis. There was no penis. It's symbolic. And it's the same exact thing when you really look at it. So get that understanding. Same thing. Same beings we're talking about. Same situation with the sun. Same thing with the zodiac. It all makes sense when you begin to understand and look into everything. So remember the Sphinx. And we're talking about Alpha, Omega, beginning, and end. The Sphinx represents the beginning, if you remember. So the Sphinx represents Leo, which Leo faced, the Sphinx faced Leo between 10 and 30,000 years ago, which we know the Egyptians called the Septepi, or the first time. So when the moon is in Leo, it marks the beginning of a cycle, a monthly cycle. When the moon is in Cancer, it marks the end of a cycle. So the moon in Leo represents the right eye of Horus. When it's in Cancer, the left eye, which is basically the Alpha and Omega. But it's much deeper than this, as I'm going to break down right here. But first, understand, as we know, Jesus in the end of Revelations, Revelations 22:16, he says, I am the bright and morning star. Osiris is also referred to as the bright and morning star. We know Lucifer, Satan, is referred to as the bright and morning star. But we know the bright and morning star is Venus. And in the Bible, in the NIV, they made sure that they put that Lucifer as the bright and morning star. And as I said, we know Venus represents the bright and morning star. But a lot of people had no clue that Jupiter is also referred to as the bright and morning star. Now, again, all this stuff is going to come together in a second, but my main goal is to get you guys to understand that these things that we're talking about, as I alluded to in the beginning, when we're getting into Osiris, these main gods are all talking about the same thing. When we get into Jesus, when we get into God, when we get into Horus and Osiris, we're talking about the same exact stuff